Well, hello, everybody. I thought I'd get on here and kind of release some things that I'm feeling and sensing and kind of give you a word to encourage and all the above that I just mentioned. I want to kind of bring a thought that's been going through me. And, there's a lot of things I'd love to give the new thing of what God's doing and what I feel God's doing, not only for me personally, but He's trying to get a message to the body of Christ and to the family of God, if I could say it that way. But we've been sometimes you get caught in this reality of revelation. You need something fresh, you need something new. Yeah, you do if you've processed the last new that came through to you. Because I think a lot of people get caught and captured by the newness of a revelation or something fresh from God, and they forfeit the process of the last revelation that God gave to them. And what you end up doing when you do that is you're just gathering data, forfeiting the process of transformation or the invitation of the last revelation, and to become the truth of what God was trying to tell you in the last revelation, to become this truth. And all of a sudden you go somewhere else and you capture another one and another revelation, another revelation. Well, there's something about that you need to understand, that revelation is an invitation to become what the revelation is or what truth is. If you don't do that, then you'll end up sacrificing process, and all you do is have knowledge of data, but you've never been transformed. And so what has happened in this last season of what's happening in America and across the globe is our ability, if I can say that, if transformation is done right, transformation always takes you back to new. Oh my gosh, new is such a powerful word, because when you think about new has no reference point. That's why it's difficult for a lot of people to step into the new things of God, because new has no reference. You can't read a manual about how to do new. You write a manual after you've done the new thing. That's why it's difficult a lot of times. Hear me again. I'm going to hit that button right there. The new thing of God, everybody wants the assurance that this new thing of God they're stepping into is solidified and it's been, tested, and it's going to happen. Got news for you. That was really proper English. Got news for you. I got some really, really big information here that I want to release to you. There is no reference for new. And that's why it's so difficult for a lot of times to people to step into a new place in God, because there's no manual to get to the new. It's a process that you just step into. However, I have to go back to Hebrews 11:6. I think I have it here somewhere amongst my notes here. I'm going to read it to you. Hebrews 11:6. So I want to read this to you really quick, because new, what I found out, in order to get into new, you're going to have to go through Hebrews 11:6 in order to get to that reality. And here's what it says. But without faith, it is impossible to please him. Now, we've heard that a bajillion times. I've heard it a bajillion times. It's like religion's worn that scripture out because there was no breath on it. Nobody explained it. It's just, where do you get faith? Do you just go to the store and buy it? Do you go read your Bible and you just get it? How does that happen? But it's very clear as if you just read the rest of the verse. Here's what it is. But without faith, it's impossible to please him. For he who comes to God, there you go, you must believe that he is. Okay. Here's the second half. And that he's a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. Wait a minute now. Let's go back to that again. But without faith, it's impossible to please him. Now, you wouldn't give a statement of it's impossible to please him without the formula to please him. It would be really crude and rude to say, oh, without faith. And you'd have to ask the question, well, what is faith? Well, part of that process here, it says, without faith, it's impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is. There you go. You have to anchor into his existence, not sail into it. You have to anchor into it. There's the issue. First part of the formula of faith is you got to anchor into his existence. You must believe that he is. And here's the second part, that he's actually a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. Oh, so your faith needs if I can say it this way, your faith needs a boost because you need a revelation of reward. See, a lot of people think are still trying to please God, but he's already seen you as the pleasure of God. So you want to understand that what he's doing here is he is trying to what can I say? Give you a reward. He wants to bless you because that's what good fathers do. That's what they do. So when you get that reality and that understanding, you realize that, oh, I get it. I'm supposed to anchor into him. Okay, so how do you anchor into him? How do you do that? Well, there's a lot of things that we can get into and really zero in on something like that. How do you anchor into him? Well, listen, what I want to do is I want to kind of bring some reminders to you today, because I think a lot of times it's dangerous to be around revelation because it gets you excited. And danger means you get to go through the process to become a truth, and it might be a part of the renewing of you, that new thing. But what I've discovered is some people will sacrifice the process of what this revelation is supposed to be doing in them, and they forfeit it to gathering knowledge about just gathering data, more data, more content. No, if you just stop and just what God just revealed to you, park in that, process through that, become that, here comes the next thing. And the more you do that, the deeper the strength of the anchor will hang on to the existence of who he is. Because when things get really rough, when there's life challenging, death is at the door or death is present, then you realize how big is my anchor? How strong is it? What's it really anchored into? Because the crisis really reveals the strength of the anchor. The crisis always reveals the strength of the anchor. The crisis always reveals the strength of the anchor. So you realize that what happened is we live from the kingdom that we most think about. That's what we do. Now, if you're coming in with faith, because what fear is just the absence of the knowledge of his truth. That's what fear is. It's the absence of the knowledge of his truth. So when that comes into that, when you come into this crisis, you got to go, okay, where's my faith? Well, Hebrews 6 here, 11:6 says, you got to believe that he is. That in that existence, he's going to reward you for staying in his existence. That's just so good. That's just like, yeah, no kidding. But here's what happens. Here's the thing that comes into this, people, is that, again, this is going to be a reminder of what's been happening over the last 2 years, and some of the things I'm in observation mode. We see things, or I've seen things. I say we. I'm going to speak for myself. I've seen things. I was going, See, if you don't know how to shape your life, it will be shaped for you, because somebody else is going to take the spot that should have been you shaping your life, and another circumstance will shape your life. So what I realized is we've been in this hectic time the last couple of years, but however, there is this thing called mind management, because transformation is done by the renewing of the mind. We have to be in a revelatory realm in order to receive the new thing from God, because here's what happens. The less revelation a church has, the less spiritual activity is there. You just can't have spiritual activity unless the breath of God is present. Revelation is the breath of God. That's what it is. It's the revelatory realm where the breath breathes on the word and it produces a voice. And everything, as we know in the kingdom, is based on voice. So when you kind of gonna get an understanding of that, again, I went back to Hebrews 11:6 and just wanted to put that out there. Faith is actually what you do is immovable trust. You are so anchored into the existence of him that you said, I'm 100% into the trust of who he is. I trust 100% of who he is, and I'm all in. Because faith will work from peace and rest. And what happens is when something comes into the contradiction, it tries to make you strive. The greatest thing I think you can do to the enemy is remain in peace when he brings a contradiction to the truth that you've become. I'll say that again. The greatest thing that you understand that the enemy hates is that you remain in peace when the contradiction of the truth that you have become, you still remain in peace. It's like Satan, he has nowhere to put a hook, see? And the test of Satan, or what Satan tries to tempt us out of, is the peace of who God is. And it all comes back to, Jesus there in the dialogue with Nicodemus, if you recall. He came to him and Jesus said, you got to be born again. He goes, for what reason? You got to be born again to what? See the kingdom. Well, the fight's over the eyes. That's what it's over. To see the kingdom. To do what? To see the kingdom. You got to be born again to do what? See the kingdom. Therefore, if I was the enemy, I'm going to try to get your eyesight over somewhere else on a different kingdom, a different circumstance, whatever it is, and you begin to lose your eyesight for the kingdom. I got news for you, people. Here's something I keep hitting the button on, and I always will. The economy of the kingdom hasn't changed just because the economy of earth has. The economy in the kingdom is always the same. See, that's the power of anchoring into his existence. It doesn't change there. The contradiction to it is when you're in the natural realm, and the natural realm wants to take away your existence of your anchor in him and make you believe that the kingdom has gone crazy on the economy of what it is. Therefore, that's why the economy down here is, and we start challenging God and saying, hey, why is this happening? What have I done wrong? No, that's not it. So what you have to realize is what I'm saying here today is I want to go back and visit just for a few moments. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on here today because this kind of stuff you just got to go. I'm going to put a check there. I'm going to check myself on that one. I want to make sure I'm anchored into existence and that he's going to reward me. That's what he's going to do. Please hear me. There's circumstances that are tough, man. They are tough. The greatest thing you can do is bring around somebody that carries the divine mind of God, because what I've realized is that the crisis, not only does it reveal the strength of the anchor, it also reveals the mind that's in that crisis. The crisis reveals the core of the person. It reveals the mind. It reveals all of that strength. It reveals all that where your strengths are and where they aren't. So let me just give you a couple little insights here. When that happens, our strength in spiritual warfare, or when a thought comes contrary to the thoughts of a divine mind, our strength is spiritual warfare is when our ability to control, here we go, control your thoughts and turn that which is trying to ensnare you and turn it around where it's captivated or it gets ensnared by itself. There's what I mean by that is it has nowhere to put a snare on you. You have to know how to move in this management of your thought realm, because God's thought, again, I'm going to go back to Hebrews 11:6. You have to believe that he exists and that he's a rewarder. If you get that just anchored there, you're on a great way to receive great treasure from God. So that is part of this, I think, this contradiction in a lot of ways that happened this last couple of years on this earth. It's revealed where people's minds are really at. So when you kind of go, oh, okay, I see where you're at, because here's reality. Renewing the mind is progressive. I'll say it again. Renewing the mind is progressive. You don't get a new mind just because you're born again. You have the privilege to become new again because you're born again. And that's a process. It's hard to demonstrate a person's mind without knowing that mind of that person. And so anyone who knows the mind of God can talk like God. So if you can't articulate, let me help you out. If you don't know the mind of God on something, then don't say anything about it until you do. I'll say it again. If you don't have the mind of God on something, don't say anything about it until you do. Because your mind, you're going to either reinforce the strong tower of what God has you to run into, and you're safe and secure in it, or you're going to run into and build bricks around a stronghold. And so the question is you're going to ask is, how do you get the mind of God? Well, how do you get the mind of anybody? Through relationship. It's that powerful thing of relationship. So when you begin to realize the simplicity of what I'm saying, but it's profound in the impact of what it is that a lot of people end up chasing things, and it becomes a crisis because they're fueling the contradiction rather than relying on the strength of the anchor to see the reward that's on the other side of this. Please hear me on this. You have to realize that God is a good God and that he's a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. Gosh, that's just so easy to understand, because what happens is people will begin to, if they don't see the strength of who he is, they're going to find the strength of who Satan is. There's nothing in between. Either it's going to go for God or it's going to go for what Satan's doing. And your verbiage and everything begins to move around that, because faith always works from peace and rest, always. And why I say it that way is because God doesn't make decisions from desperation. I don't know if he's probably been white knuckled on his throne trying to make a decision that what Satan's doing. I don't think that's ever happened. I don't think it ever will. In fact, he's already sent the end of who and what Satan is, and so you already know the character of God, that he just makes a decision, he's in peace, and that's the way he goes. Okay, so I wanted to put that out there just on the front end of things, because I realized that, I want to reiterate the value of what it is to be reminded of certain things of Your freedom in God is not the ability to do whatever you want. It's the ability to do what is right. There's a bomb statement right there. I'll say it again. This freedom that God has given us in the righteousness of who we are, we have the privilege to have freedom to make choice, free will. It's not the ability to do whatever you want. It's your ability to do what is right. How does God think? What would be the move that God would do? How do we do that? So you realize, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to surround myself, and maybe that's part of what I want to talk about here for a moment, is just surrounding yourself with the value of people that have a divine mind. Because in Jeremiah 17, I want to read this to you. In Jeremiah 17, it says this, verse 9. This is really good. I have to say so myself before I even get to it. But anyway, Jeremiah 17, verse 9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I'm sure quite a few have heard that before. And then it says, I, the Lord, search the heart and I test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doings. That was verse 10. I'm going to go back to verse 9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Well, one of the words in the definitions, I want to just visit this really quick, because I was talking about anchors. Where your anchor is which is necessary is actually your point of what your reference is. Jeremiah here, in that word deceitful there, one of the descriptions there is foot tracked. The heart has been foot tracked above all things, or a heart that has been foot tracked above all things, or how you want to put in what I'm trying to say here is the heart can be foot tracked. And what happens is you read it in that context, you go, oh my gosh, that means a heart that has been walked out without permission is one of the things that can happen when deceit wants to move you from the sight on God, and it deceives you onto something that walked on your heart. Did you catch that? So I'm going to say it again. The heart is what? Deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? What I would say in that, if you go look that up, one of the definitions is that it's foot tracked. It's been walked on. Your heart that has been walked on is deceitfully wicked, because the anchor of what has happened to you is what's driving the vengeance of you, or the statue of, this is my constitution, I live by this because this is what's happened to me. And so you realize a lot of times that when things come into our lives without permission, it's actually something trying to put footprints on your heart to re-anchor you emotionally into the destruction of the deceit that's happening in a moment, so that you pull up the anchor that he is good, that he is, and that he's a rewarder, because footsteps on a heart will be imprinted in your brain. And if you don't have your heart locked in the walk of God, something else is going to walk on you. So you got to understand there's things here that, that begin to come forward. I should say it this way too. I think I'm just sitting here just kind of pondering that as I say that. You will reveal the footsteps that has walked on your heart, and the crisis reveals the footsteps of the heart. There it is. That's what I'm trying to say. Crisis reveals the footsteps that have been walked on the heart, because all the layers are off. And generally in a crisis, it's either life or death. There's nothing, you got, depending on the choice you make. And what's your reference? The footsteps that's been on your heart. If you have walked in the footsteps of Jesus, then the footprints of God will be all over your heart, and it'll be an easy thing to walk out. If it's something that you've been walked on without permission and something is stamped on your heart, the crisis will reveal the footsteps, and then you will hear the voice of those footsteps from the heart in that moment of crisis. That's what you end up realizing, and a lot of people have not had the experience. Ooh, I'm hearing some stuff now. This might turn into a 2-hour thing. I don't want to do that. But see, what footsteps have walked on your heart become the father of you. I'll say that again. The footsteps that have walked on your heart is the one that actually fathers you. And what happens is you realize that as we have been born into this family, or by the original intent and the design of what God desired for every one of us, is what you realize that in Hebrews 11:6, it talks about that he's a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. He wants to bless you. He wants to honor you. He wants to pull all the content that's in you out of you. Well, if I was the enemy, what would I do? I would put the footsteps of another father on the heart of who you are, so you can never anchor yourself into the footsteps of who God is. And what happens is you begin to realize every person on this earth, male, female, have been designed to be blessed by a dad. Period. That is the original intent. Every true father, even in Hebrews 11:6, the power of a father's blessing, and I've met hundreds of people and I've taught on this, and I should do a whole nother thing on the Father's blessing and understanding the power of what that is, because there's a lot of things that, please hear me right on that. I have Jesus, he'll bless me, da, 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 da. Okay. I've heard that from a lot of people, but you go, why is it I still feel empty? It's because there's a certain spot inside of you. It's difficult to bring a natural blessing from a natural dad that is spiritual and blesses you and pulls the content of the power of you out of you, because that's the way it was designed. A good father will do that. He'll pull the greatness that's inside of you. It's kind of like the other day, I heard this years ago from Pfizer. It was just brought to my mind the other day, but we get the bread of life. Jesus is the bread of life, right? He is the bread of life. So if I can put it in the context of a sandwich, bread here, bread here. But if we want to put it in the context of like a sandwich, what I just said, it's the meat or the substance that's in between the bread that identifies what that sandwich is. And a lot of people have the bread of life. They have salvation, but they've never had the identity, or they've gone through the substance or gone through the process to discover the substance that's inside of them. Part of a father's design is to bring forth the substance that's in their children and to bring out the value of what's in them. When the father does not do that, then there's something in the realm of the natural that feels like it's off. Even though you're walking with God, that natural thing that God did to model through men to the children, if it's absent, it's something that's in the unseen realm that can't be brought into the seen realm, because God doesn't bring himself in this natural realm and then bless you. Please hear me right. He does bless you from the unseen realm. Please hear me right. I'm not trying to be goofy with this. I've just realized I have laid my hands on hundreds of people, that have realized they didn't have a natural father for whatever circumstance. Things went crazy. The dad goes goofy, and they desire to be blessed. Yeah, you desire to be blessed because that's the design of who you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be blessed by a father. And sometimes it's difficult for a person. They can receive Jesus, but they can't understand the Father, because they'll see Jesus as a Savior, but they can't see Jesus being pointing to the Father and say, you need to meet him. And a lot of people I've known know Jesus really well. The Father, they don't. Yet you understand that the Holy Spirit never points to himself. The Holy Spirit always points to Jesus, and Jesus always points to the Father. So it's progressive in the understanding of the reality. Okay. That's what I was kind of unlocking there. Anyway, that being said, the whole sandwich analogy is that's what's missing. A lot of people feel the love of God, but they don't feel the substance, or I should say, the natural design of what God put in every person is to be pulled on or nurtured by, and pull out of them the substance that's in them that identifies the sandwich of who they are. Crazy analogy, very profound though. So that being said, I believe that the next one of the things that are going to come out in this next move of God is that children that are going to be introduced to Father. That's what's going to happen. And I also kind of feel like, I need to do something that gathers the people together to get into the Father's blessing. And I'll just go back a little bit on that if I can just park there for a second. Because, like I said in Hebrews 11:6, you got to anchor into his existence. Well, if you don't have a good reference point for a father, what existence what are you trying to anchor into? That's a tough road sometimes to haul. But I found out that, like I said, I've laid my hands on hundreds and hundreds of people and prayed a Father's blessing into them. It set them free. Things came unloose. I mean, it unloosed them to the value of what they've always desired to hear from that perspective. And for whatever reason, that's just the design of what we've been designed to be unlocked. And I believe that part of this process, and that's why all the craziness, because if you get the men to go crazy and they are off base, see, what I think, if I'm modeling what Jesus modeled, He took 12 men. He knew if he could get the 12 men in order, everything else would fall into order. You've heard me say that before, but that's a reality that he understood. And I think if I can hear this, if you can hear me right, because the men are not greater than the women, please hear me in that. They are in the image, both of them are equal. There is a thing that I would like to put out as a thought, though. God brought forth Adam, and Adam was made by God. And God, in his goodness, wanted Adam to feel what God feels like when something is made from him. Say that again. God wanted Adam to feel what it feels like being God when something's made. So when you begin to realize that God made Adam, and inside of Adam was a woman, then you realize that in God's goodness, he wants Adam to feel what it feels like being God, because the woman was made from Adam. And you realize God's such a good God that he wants the abundance of what he feels like when he's making something. And then you begin to realize then the woman is the one that has a creative act to make the value of a human life in the womb of who she is. And so you see God all the way through this thing. He wants you to feel what it feels like being him and creating something and making something. And I'm just, when you look at that, you just go, God is so good in the value of what he's doing. Everything that he does, he wants to multiply and he wants to increase, and he wants you to feel what it feels like being him. That's what he really wants. Any good father wants you to feel like what he feels like. The pleasure of having, you as a son or a daughter, or however you want to look at that. It's very powerful to understand the goodness of who he is. That's part of anchoring into who he is. You got to anchor into that existence, that reality of what he thinks, and all that comes forth. If you do not have that, then you have a fight on your hands trying to establish if he's really that good. And if not, if he is, then why did this happen, this happen, this happen? That goes down that road. So I'm saying all that to say that there's a move that's coming that I think is going to be part of the next move, which is attached to his glory, but that the Father is going to be made manifest in a very powerful way. And I'm not going to get into all that and how that all unlocks and the feast and all that stuff that's been actually manifested, but and the one that isn't. But I do believe that's where it's going. So anyway, that being said, I want to just kind of put a wrap on this because I've said a lot of things already, but I want to bring out some other things. I wanted to just kind of pull some stuff together today because I see some people trying to. There's a big shift going on, as you know. There's a shift of what does this new thing look like? What is the mind of God on a certain thing? And I brought up the point new. New has no reference point. New has no reference point. So I can't tell you what that looks like. All I know is I can go back to what faith is. I'm anchored in him, and I know he's a reward of those that diligently seek him. Part of the diligence to be in him is to get rid of every second thought that wants to come to get you out of his original thought about you. I'll say that again. Said that kind of fast, so I'm going to slow it down. God wants you to stay in the original thought about you. The second thought about you is generally never about you. It's somebody talking you out of what you already are supposed to be as what God ordained you to be. Meaning, stay with the first thing that God told you to do. Stay right there. If you are if you are his pleasure, stay in the pleasure. Don't try to obtain it. You are the pleasure of God. That's why he made you. He made the image of you. That's why you are who you are. The second thought is I'm going to challenge that because this, and this came along, and obviously he doesn't think too highly of me because this happened to me, this happened. Okay, that's what I call a second thought. Don't even go down that road. You've got to know how to train your mind because, see, limitations are learned by second thoughts. Woo, I said something there. Limitation is learned by second thought. That means you've left the original thought because you're living from an unlimited God. It takes an outside thought from that unlimited God to pull you out of there because God can't train you up in limitation. He can't train you up in sickness. He doesn't know how to do death. He doesn't know how to do any of that. He doesn't know how to train you up in that. He doesn't know how to train you in anxiety, fear, worry, doubt, unbelief, all that stuff. Therefore, a limitation is learned. And so the first thought that he had about you was, I'm going to make you as me. And he's always stayed with that. And he will talk to you as if you have never sinned. That's how he talks to you. That's his language. I'm going to talk to you as if you've never sinned. That's why I'm going to talk to you. Now, there's things that we understand, and hear me right in that. There's things, if you get off into sin, he's going to course correct that. but he's going to approach you as if you've never sinned. It's like he just tells you about the goodness of what he sees in you. He references the books in heaven about you, what you are, who you're to become. It's like when he came to Gideon, he says, "You're a mighty man of valor." And the first thing Gideon did was challenge him. Why? Because Gideon bought into a second thought. Same thing with Saul. Samuel approaches him, "You're the next king of Israel." Nope. He was challenged. Saul challenged him with a second thought. "No, I'm just of the lowly tribe of Benjamin." And so what you realize is you got to know how to fight off second thoughts. You have to stay with plan A, if I can say it that way. Go with the thought that God had originally said or told you, or what he was thinking when he made you. You have to find that spot. Once you find that spot, you find the original thought, you can't allow a second thought to come into that. That's where death, disease, and all kinds of other crazy stuff that happens is. It's not that you're immune from that, but you have the right to go through that. It cannot take you out. There's no rights in that. When God says you're supposed to be here and you're going to be here and you've anchored into the end result, God says amen to that. There's things that will come. There's shipwrecks that happen. A viper comes out and strikes. You've been stoned. You've been left for dead. I mean, it's just crazy stuff. And see, people always want the 100% immunity from that stuff. It's not immunity from the stuff. It's immunity to go through. It's the privilege to go through the stuff and be untouched by the stuff that came against you to take away your first thought. That's what that's all about. So when you get that understanding and that concept in your side of you, listen, you've got to have, there's things that go off on a daily basis that want to challenge the things of God. It wants to pull up the anchor of his existence that you have in your heart. Listen, you've got to be around people that have a secure, deep anchor in the existence of God, the power of God, the privilege to feel what it feels like being him. Be around those people. There are things that I've noticed that people would rather keep a relationship with second thoughts than be alone with the first thought. Woo! Say that again. Okay, I will. There are people that would rather have relationships in the value of people that have second thoughts and keep those than be alone with the first thought. The first thought will always come to you as he did with, please hear me on this. This is what I'm just kind of feeling and sensing right now. The first thought that comes to you, or as God came to Adam, he started communing with Adam back and forth. And then they had a relationship. He had him name the animals. And so God then says it's not good for him to be alone. Listen, if God made himself in the form of what we call Adam, then you realize that in the relationship with God, he's going to multiply the people of the same mind of who you are around you, because that's exactly what he did with a woman. He put Adam to sleep, pulls out a woman. She has the same value, same image, same everything, and it was something that God did. Now, you could go in there and go, Adam. Of course, Adam didn't have this in him, but this is what we do, because I understand we come from a fallen mindset, and a lot of us are still working on righteousness consciousness. But you could have said, well, wait a minute, God. I'm here all alone, you know. You got a couple up there that are, you got friends up there and called the Trinity, and I'm just down by myself. So what's up with that? He didn't do that. What you realize is that there's a communion there with God, and God says, and that gets into love and all kinds of things, but he duplicated, or he made another person with the same mind, same values, same image, same everything. And there's a lot of times that I found in my life, it's better to be quiet in the presence of God and allow him to bring other people with the mind of God, rather than trying to quiet the questions by connecting with people that don't have the right answers. But you get the fellowship with something that's a second thought than rather with the first thought. I hope you heard me in that right there. If you're hearing my heart right, I've seen a lot of people lay down the thoughts of God because they didn't have the humanity, the human soulish connection that they felt was more necessary than the relationship with God. So they went with something else, and they left the first thought for a second thought. And then that's when it becomes, really hectic, because the minute you disconnect from the divine mind, you just qualified for poverty. Don't know why I said that, but I just did. There are things that happen. The riches of the king are no longer available when you've left the king for another kingdom. So somebody's probably hearing this. They're going, okay, that explains why I feel like I'm alone. But I'm telling you, God's trying to show you the abundance of the riches of how he sees you, how he's going to reward you, how he's going to be diligent and faithful to you, because that's what good fathers do. They just do that. So when you begin to unlock all this reality, I think I just kind of, it's a little bit all over the map on this one. However, there's some things there that we need to be reminded of. Stay with original thought. Don't let second thoughts seduce you out of the original thought. Know that limitation is learned. Fire all the teachers around you that are trying to give you a second opinion. Stay with the original thing that God said with you, and he's going to reward you. And by the way, God only knows one thing: life. Life and life more abundantly. That's all he knows. The only way that you can activate, hear me on this and I'll close with this. Interesting enough, in the original intent, that tree called the revelation of the knowledge of good and evil, that tree could also be called the tree of split decision. One side's good, one side's evil, but it all has death. But in it is a split decision. You can either do good or you can do evil, but the end result is still death. And what you realize is death was present, but it was powerless. Death was present, powerless in the garden. It was there, but it was powerless. And until you give your mind to it or your thought to it, which then releases the authority of who you are to it, it then had the power to take you out. So they didn't stay with their first thought. And that was what? That they were made in the image and likeness of who God was. The seduction was the second thought. You're not like him. And so always go with first thought. If God's saying anything right now, stay with the program of first thought. Endure, stay in it, endure, obey, and the reward is coming. I feel like there's life right there. Don't walk away from the threshold of life because the loudness of, or the seduction of the loud voices trying to pull you away into something that you think this is all for nothing because I feel like I'm alone. You're not alone. You're about ready to step into the abundance of what God's going to do to you, not only in the laws of life, but in relationships and those around you that have the ability to expand the value inside of you, that there's going to be a true father that's going to show you the value of what he really is. And I feel like even the heart thing that people have been walked on, God's going to begin to put his footsteps all over the heart of who you are and the ideas, your mindset, your love, your desires of your heart. He's going to fulfill that. That's what he does. I just don't see anything less than that of God saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to let the footsteps of yesterday walk out. No, he's not going to do that. So if I can just kind of go out on this whole understanding of, I didn't go so deep today because I didn't feel that was necessary, but I did come to you as a reminder. Stay with the original. Stay with the value of that he is good, that he is a rewarder of those that diligently seek him. Remember, anchor yourself into his existence. How do you do that? Run with people that have the same heart. It's people that have, you can see those that are anchored. You can see that those that have been blown away by goofy stuff and dumb myths and crazy stuff. But you're going to find out those that are true, those that are really anchored, they haven't moved. In fact, they haven't moved through this whole crisis. It's kind of a cool thing to watch this, is that when this crisis hit the earth, you'll see who's got anchors and who's got sails. Anyway, that being said, all right, I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I hope you got something out of that. If anything, I want to encourage you guys. The laws of life are in motion. Stay with the original thought about the laws of life. Do not be seduced out of them. And out of that, the abundance of life is going to roar. Please hear me on that. It's going to roar. So anyway, we'll talk to you guys soon.